Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellbite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk about the Rift Herald, as this is an objective I feel like is very, very often misused or otherwise has an undue focus in a lot of low elo games. I feel like a lot of players just kind of take Herald because, well, it's an objective and it's there and I'm not doing anything else right now, so why not? And they don't really understand exactly why you want to take Rift Herald or exactly when you should be taking Rift Herald, and even then when you should be actually using the Rift Herald. A lot of times it feels like they just take it and then say, oh yeah, crap, I actually got to use this thing, and then either don't get value from it at all or get very limited value from it. So today I wanted to kind of give my tips on how to make the best use of Rift Herald and how to guarantee that either you're taking her in the appropriate places or that you're getting value from her in the first place. Now, first and foremost, I think it's important to state that Herald is not an obvious objective. Like, unlike Drakes or Baron, Herald is not a take and forget objective. So, Elemental Drakes, for example, you can kind of take it and it just generally gives you free stats. You take the Mountain Drake and boom, your team is just tankier than they were before by a little amount. And you don't have to think about that, right? That's not something you have to try and use. It's not something you have to consider in your calculations. You just kind of say, yeah, okay, I have a bunch of bonus resistances now and that's free and I literally don't have to worry about it at all. Baron is not quite the same because it does last a limited amount of time. You can't just take Baron and have permanent stats forever, but you still do have to at least say, you know, Baron gives you stats for free. You have to play a little bit more aggressively than you would before, but it's still free stats. It's still nothing that you actually have to try to abuse. Herald, meanwhile, is, I think, the only objective in the game where it's possible to get no value from it at all. This is an objective that you can take, you can successfully secure Herald, and still have the objective denied by the enemy team, other than the very small amount of golden experience that taking Herald does grant. So that, I think, is a big thing to consider before you go for Rift Herald, is to consider that it's not enough to simply take the objective as you would a Drake. You have to actually get value from her afterwards. And she's also not a free objective. So yeah, you know, unlike something that you can take and then just it kind of gives you value just from taking it in the first place, like a regular jungle camp, Rift Herald takes a very long time to take solo, or you need to pull up a solo laner in order to help you, at which point you're also denying yourself that solo laner from farming or gaining experience by themselves. And that means that your jungler is wasting a long amount of time on this objective that, once again, is not guaranteed to give you value. It's not guaranteed to even do anything for your team. You might spend a full minute soloing Herald only to die right before the trinket's about to expire and literally get no value at all from Rift Herald. And a lot of times even junglers will basically see the enemy team on the Drake and say, that's fine, I'll go take Herald instead and we can trade the Drake for a Herald. And I'm like, why would you do that? You're giving away guaranteed value, guaranteed stats in favor of an objective that you may or may not even be able to get value out of. So it's not always an obvious trade in my book, especially if you think you can compete for a Drake. I feel like that is almost always the correct choice over Rift Herald. So I do feel like there are a lot of ways in which teams just kind of take Herald because, well, she's there and I guess we may as well, and then they end up just not realizing why Herald is particularly strong and why pro teams take her. So keep these in mind when going for Herald. There are essentially three situations in which I feel like Herald should be taken or in which Herald should be used. And so if you are able to take the Herald because either you weren't able to contest for the Drake, so you may as well trade it for the Herald in the first place, or you have a very fed top laner who you can pull down to guarantee an early Rift Herald because you know that they're already ahead and losing out on a little bit of golden experience isn't as big of a deal, and it will help you end games earlier. That's the biggest thing I think to say for Herald right off the bat, is that she is an objective that is very, very good if you're trying to end the game as quickly as possible. She's not really an objective that you just want to be taking and then trying to play for the long game. She's an objective that's really good when you have, for example, a Renekton, a Talon who's popping off in the mid lane, and maybe something like a Lee Sin. Okay, sure. Grab that Herald because your team should already be winning the early game, and Herald will help you win that early game even harder. The other thing you want to do is, even if you are able to take the Herald, regardless of what kind of team composition you're using, there are multiple situations that you want to actually use her in. Once you take Herald, you need to be immediately thinking of how you're going to use the objective. It's not enough to say, well, I took Herald, and then go back to doing your regular jungler thing. It's very important instead to say, we've taken Herald, how are we now going to use her? And in that regard, I have a couple of thoughts about how you can effectively use this objective. First and foremost, you want to be using Herald to break early tower plating in exchange for a gold advantage. Even if the tower does not die as a whole, which a lot of people are like, you used Herald, but you didn't even kill first tower, so what was the point? The point can be oftentimes dropping Herald, of course, trying to drop her close enough to the tower that she charges immediately. If you drop her any further than that, she's surprisingly fragile and will get killed more often than not if she isn't able to get that charge immediately, or she gets body blocked, or she sees a minion wave and starts fighting that, and the enemy champions can kind of walk up and kill her in one hit. So either way, assuming you deployed Herald properly, one of the biggest things you can do is gaining those early plates. It's easy enough to drop her into a lane and then walk away and make sure that you have an allied champion in the vicinity to gain the tower plating, because Herald will almost always break at least 2 plates, which means that though the champion in the lane will gain a ton of early gold from those tower plates going down, and it's basically guaranteed tower plates. They don't have to step up to last hit it, they don't have to kill their lane opponent more often than not, you just have to be in the vicinity as Herald charges, and it's a bunch of free gold for that champion, which can accelerate a champion who's either attempting to scale, or a champion who is doing well early and you really want to just snowball their lead further than before. Another way you can use Herald is to secure first tower, of course. Now, you do have to be careful. Herald won't one-shot a tower if it's still got its plates up, unless it has 2 or fewer plates. So you do need to make sure that that tower is either low enough that that you're guaranteed the one-shot, or that you can afford to step up and take the rest of the tower from there. A lot of times, players are sort of drop her, and she charges, and she doesn't kill the tower, and then they step up to say, well, it's so low, we can kill it from here, and then they don't realize that they are going under tower against somebody, let's say like a Renekton, and the Renekton double kills them, kills the Herald, and you don't get first tower, you gave up a bunch of gold, it's bad times all around. So keep it in mind that even if you're not able to secure the first tower with the Herald, at least getting the plates can be a good thing, and even if that tower is super low, shove a couple of minions into it and that tower will die regardless, so you don't have to worry about that as much. The other thing, of course, that you can do with Rift Herald is use it to secure a troublesome enemy tower. You'll more often than not see this as a Herald that's a second Herald that's already deployed. So a Herald was already used earlier in the game, and then you're able to sort of secure a 17 or 18 minute Rift Herald and say, okay, well, how do we use this? First tower's already gone, plates are already gone, what is the use of this objective? The biggest thing you can do is use it to secure a tower that's very, very difficult to kill. More often than not, this will be mid lane tower, just because mid lane tower is the hardest tower to kill. It's in a very defended position, but it's also a very important tower to get rid of because of how controlling it can be. Especially killing mid lane tower opens up a large portion of the enemy jungle for you to kind of start infiltrating, setting up vision, looking for picks, looking for team fights, that sort of thing. And you can't really do that very easily when the enemy team still has their mid lane tower available. So definitely, it's a good one to use a sort of late game Herald on. The other way you can do it is if an enemy team member has particularly high wave clear or is a champion that you don't really want to have to dive to kill their tower. So an Ornn, for example, you don't really want to ever try to dive an Ornn, so just drop the Herald in his lane, let it charge, let it kill that top lane tower, and then at the very least, you've got that tower dead. You don't care if Herald gets a second charge off afterwards. That, I think, is the biggest thing. You really don't. A lot of times, Herald's value is gained immediately upon the charge. Herald charged, Herald killed the tower or gave you plates, and after that, Herald dies. That's totally fine. You don't have to guarantee that Herald is able to get multiple charges in order for that objective to have value for your team. In fact, oftentimes that's a trap, is escorting Herald to the next tower after she's already charged, because that leads to overextensions. The enemy team, you know, is already rotating to deal with the Herald, so oftentimes escorting her in can be an easy way to give up a bunch of gold to the enemy team as they kill you, they kill whomever was helping you escort the Herald, and then they're also able to kill the Herald on top of that, which does give gold back to them. So, but generally speaking, those are a couple of the ways you can use Herald in order to make sure she has value. The biggest thing is just making sure you have a plan for that objective. Again, it's not a take and forget objective. It is an objective that you have to be actively thinking about. When do I actually want to take the Herald? Do I want to take the Herald? And once you do take her, to be able to say, when and where do I want to use her? Do I have support? Do I have the ability to make sure she's able to get the charge off? Because otherwise, this objective is not going to end up being worth it, and it's just not going to be worth my time. So anyways, those are just a few of my thoughts as to how to use Rift Herald and how teams are actually using Rift Herald, because again, like I said, it's not really an objective that you can just kind of take and forget. So these are just kind of things that I'm thinking of that hopefully will give you guys some assistance in your games, especially if you are a jungler who's looking at Rift Herald. I hope you enjoyed the video today, guys. If you did, go ahead and leave it with a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.